Welcome to Cold War Conversations, the home of real stories of the Cold War.
So just leave it in your safe and don't get it wet. And I said, okay, but what would happen if it got wet? I mean, how bad could it be? And he goes, oh, how do I explain this to somebody who's not a nuclear scientist? He goes, okay, remember Hiroshima? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, picture Hiroshima, but without the explosion, but the same amount of dead people.
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to Cold War history. Please make sure you follow us in your podcast app so you don't miss future episodes. Susan Miller continues the story of her CIA career, recalling a harrowing experience of the 1991 US Embassy fire in Moscow. She recalls the unexpected humanity displayed by a KGB officer who helped save lives during the crisis. In Poland, a KGB walk-in claims to have Microfiche containing the names of every spy the KGB was running overseas. And as CIA chief in Vilnius, Susan is confronted by another KGB walk-in, this time with a box of weapons-grade uranium. I'm delighted to welcome Susan Miller back to our Cold War conversation. And this fire, was it quite a bad fire?
It was really bad. It went into every floor of the embassy. So what happened was we had fire alarms. That embassy had burnt down once before, many years before I was there. And it was known all these Russian buildings are not built well. There's some cement in them, the floors and stuff like that and everything else, but it's just not good. So our embassy had a smaller fire some years before. And after that smaller fire, we have a fire marshal that is out at the embassy all the time because just, working with the Russians, making sure that we have everything that we need. And so we all had masks and stuff at our desks, just in case. And we were told that if you're, on this staircase, you'll go out the back. And we would practice this once in a while, once every month or two or something like that. And so every time we would practice it, I was one of the ones that I'm going out the back. And all of us are standing there going, yeah, but there's like a 10-foot, 11-foot wall over. How do we get out of here if the building's on fire? And we mentioned that to the fire guy, and he's like, oh, no, it would be fine, because, the fire will go out the front windows and, all the rest of the stuff. And then, again, there was always these false alarms that were going off. So false alarm. So I'm in the station. I'm not in my cover job, which is downstairs. I'm upstairs. And I'm in the station, and the fire alarm had gone off earlier that day, and it was a fake one. And then it went off again. And one of the guys in my office, I remember his name is Greg. And Greg's like, I'm so sick of this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to see what, I'm going to go tell what for to the fire guy because I have to write something and I can't do that. It's too loud. Right. So he goes outside and he opens the door and he sees flames and he shuts it really quick and he comes running in and he's like, it's real. And we're like, it's real. And so we're shoving stuff into safes and, locking things up so that if the Russians do come in, and we had enough doors, we didn't think they'd be able to get in, but we had to do all of that. And then we literally ran by flames, literally like flames coming in windows, smoke coming up. We all looked like, little charcoaled. And so we get down and we're going down and we go out the back door. And a bunch of other people are on the other staircase where they go out the front door. So maybe half of us were in the back and the other half were in the front. And so all of us in the back are like now standing there and it's the back of the building that is burning. This new elevator they were creating on the outside of the building, caught fire. And we're standing there and it looks like it's going to fall on us. The fire tower is going to fall on us. And we can't get out because why? There's no exit. And so what happened was somebody went to, and this is where I suddenly realized that Soviet people are human beings. And this is where I really believe that we hate the government, but not the people in it. I don't hate Chinese people. I don't like the government, that kind of thing. So anyway, so we put a ladder up and, some guy goes up and then they hook another ladder down. But going down, It's like, there's this long wall and there's a slope on it. And there's a Russian milliman, a uniformed KGB guy who guards the embassy. And he was out there, and the guy on the top says, "Hey, does this reach the ground?" And he's speaking Russian with him, and the guy down below says, "No, it doesn't reach the ground, but I'll catch you guys. And when you get down to the bottom, just jump off, and I'll catch you because it's on a slope. I don't want you guys to break a leg, kind of thing." And so, okay, fine. So people start going over, and I get up there, and I look down, and I see this guy, and I get down there, and I ask him in Russian, are you going to be okay if I just jump? And he goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I jumped down and he caught me. I didn't fall. I didn't break a leg, and he moved me on, and he kept doing that. And we all went down to first of all, so a few of us went out front to see what the fire looked like. And then we went down to the muster place at the new building. And that guy stood there and got every single one of us that were trapped back there. Not a single person died. Not a single person was injured. One fireman from the Russian side got smoke inhalation. That was it for this major, major fire. And so later on, the ambassador called him, his boss, somebody from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs up into some big fancy room at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and gives him a medal for saving all of us. It was really adorable. And that was also one of those times where it's like, okay, they're human. I can't hate them. I just hate their government.
Were you there when President Reagan visited Moscow?
Sure was.
Tell me
that was
about
so much
that.
fun. The first thing he did is he came to the embassy to speak to us. And I have a picture somewhere of somebody from the press office was taking pictures as he was there. And he came to speak to us because this is his Gorbachev, tear down this wall thing that he wanted. I think his speech was after that or whatever. But that's what he was going to talk about, is how can we get out of this morass and start spending money on other things than military sort of stuff. And so he came and he came and talked to us. He took questions. He was very personable. I loved him because, of course, he was a Californian. I didn't care what politics he had. It was just that he was a Californian. And so all of the above, he went, and our ambassador Matlock took him to see Gorbachev and to see all these other people and everything else. And they started to work on things, etc. And then it was not too long after that the Soviet Union actually did fall apart, where Russia became Russia and the other countries became their own individual countries. And so in a weird way, Reagan announcing Gorbachev tear down that wall eventually got torn down, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It sort of became the Commonwealth of Independent States, I think. Was what they described it as. So when did you leave Moscow?
I left there in 91 to go back to Washington to take Polish language, because they wanted me to go do my second tour in Poland. Again, really focusing on the Russians, not the Poles. And so I came back and I learned Polish, which is basically Russian, but spoken as if you're drunk. Do you know Russian at all?
No, I don't, but I'm sure a lot of Polish listeners are going to be upset at that description.
No, it's great because it's easier to learn, and I love the Poles. That's where I met my husband and everything. And so, bottom line is, in Russian, to go somewhere by car is pojechać. In Polish, it's pojechać. And there's also false cognates. And once in a while, you use a false cognate in a word, because I have Russian and I accidentally use a Russian word and somebody goes, and I'm like, what did I just say? You just called me an asshole. And I'm like, oh, I meant to say, isn't it lovely out, or whatever.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so what's your role in Poland? So this is
I was
92.
also undercover. I was in the economics section undercover.
Okay.
But because the Russians knew me, I was able to do a few more things than just what I did before. Mike Sulik was my DCOS in Moscow. He was my COS in Warsaw. And he spoke Russian and I spoke Russian, and nobody else in the station spoke Russian. And so when a walk-in would come, because now the Soviet Union is starting to fray a little bit. And the Berlin Wall has fallen already, and things are going southwise for the Soviet Union, and the Poles are thrilled about it and everything else. But because of that, we had a lot of walk-ins, people that would come to the embassy and say, I have information, because they saw the Soviet Union was falling and they wanted to do something. And most of them were total idiots. I mean, they had nothing. I know a guy who, and it doesn't work out. So Mike and I would take it. If he was in and I wasn't, he would take it. If I was in, he wasn't, he would take it. If we're both in, we decide who wants to take this one today. And so this one day he comes to me and he says, look, there's a walk-in downstairs, Russian. He says he's got this fabulous information. And he says, I just can't take it. I have to go do this XYZ thing with the ambassador upstairs. And I said, fine. And so I go downstairs and here's this guy and speaking Russian. And he says, hey, I have for you, he goes, I'm a former KGB officer and I'm from the first chief directorate, which is the guys that do all the spying around the world from embassies and things like that against us and others, enemies. And he says, I want something like $300,000, I think it was, or $400,000 in exchange for what I'm going to give you. And I'm like, now I'm rolling my eyes. I'm like, great, this guy's an idiot. And then he says, I've got Microfiche, and this Microfiche has the name of every single spy the first chief directorate is running overseas in any free country, NATO, US, Canada, Japan, everybody. And I was like, okay, because you just don't know, right? And so I said, can I take this up? And so I leave and I get the Marine Guard and I said, keep this guy here. Don't let him leave. And just in case. And I run upstairs to Mike and I say, Mike, let's go look at the microfiche reader. And I tell him what I told you. And so we stick it in. And Mike and I are looking at it and like, it looks legit. It's definitely a bunch of names. You can see that. You can, even one name we could, that Mike's like, I think I might know that name as somebody from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs somewhere else, and all the rest of the stuff. And so we're like, yeah, do you think it's real? And I said, well, it's real. And he goes, but don't you think that because the Soviet Union has already been falling apart for a little while, don't you think we already have this somehow? We just don't know it. We wouldn't know it necessarily. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, we'll send it in. Of course, we'll send it in like normal. We send it in right away. And so we did. And right away, by this time, it's like afternoon. And so it's getting late in Washington. And Mike decided to NIACT Washington, which means get somebody up to come in and read this thing. But what it said was, no reason to NIACT us back because this guy's coming back at such and such a time. But please immediately talk to us in the morning about what kind of extra requirements you have, or if we already have this information, what we can pay him, blah, blah, blah. And so Mike gets called in overnight and he gets called in and headquarters like, are you kidding me? We've been waiting for this forever. We don't have any of this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And we're so excited about this. And you're sure the guy's going to come? Yeah, the guy's going to come. Well, we'll give him $1 million. Okay. Or whatever it was. I think it was $1 million or it was like 500. It was a large amount, whatever it was he wanted. We'll give it to him 100%. And he's got the rest of them. Yes, he does. And so I come in and I go down and I sit and I talk to Mike and he tells me what happened. And he's like, we're never telling anybody that we thought this was a dangle. And so I promised him I never would. And so I'm telling you. So anyway, the long and short of it, it doesn't matter now, clearly.
No,
so anyway, it was really fun. And so, yeah, we met him and got him a lot of money. And so you can look at that time frame, all of these people in NATO countries, including the U.S., getting wrapped up thanks to this guy. It was really cool.
Wow. It sounds a bit like the Matrokin archive.
Yeah, it really was. It's very similar to the Mitrokin one, yeah.
Wow. Wow. And was the KGB sort of still operational at this point? Because this is 92, so this is like a year and a bit after the fall of the Soviet Union. I would have thought they're focused on other things.
We were still interested to see if this was real. For a couple of years, there was nothing else. 911 had not yet happened. And so we were still focused on Russia and China because we weren't sure what was going to happen. We had bits and pieces of information coming in from, diplomatic reporting, our reporting, NSA, where, the Soviet Union might be coming back, or this might happen, or X might happen, or Y might happen. It's one of the reasons that the U.S. government wanted to put a U.S. embassy in every single Soviet republic as soon as it fell apart, to point, and all of our NATO allies did the same thing. It was a collaboration. And they did that because they wanted to make sure that the Russians understood this is a different country. And so that was while I was in Warsaw that I was told that I was going to go be COS in Vilnius. And I was only a GS-12. That is like a clerk in a store, practically. And but I spoke Russian, so they needed Russian speakers to go and be our COSs at the time. And it was it was me and a communicator, and my communicator had to go to the COS course in case I died, so he would know how to do what I do with the laws and stuff I had to follow. And then I had to learn comms in case he died, and or got incapacitated somehow and all the rest. And they did this all over the Soviet Union. They formed what we call the Ikistans down below, and then the Baltics and Ukraine as well. And so that's what we did.
So you're talking there of the COS's chief of station.
Chief of station, yeah.
And what does that mean? What is a CIA chief of station?
You're the head of all CIA operations in that country. You are the voice to the government of that country, the people that you're allied with, like the services. And you also represent CIA to our ambassador. And so normally I was a GS-12. A GS-12 is like slightly above entry level because I'd gotten a couple promotions from the first time, right? Slightly above entry level, but not yet managerial level. But when I went to Vilnius, they quickly gave me a 13, which is the first level of manager. So I became a 13 there.
How many female chiefs of station were there at that point?
0.
So you were the first female CIA chief of station?
I should say, let me back up. I was the first one ever in the Soviet East European area. There was another female CIA officer who did somewhere in Europe before me, and I think there might have been one other. So I wasn't the first COS ever, but I was one of the first group, again, because they didn't hire that many women, and, at the time. Yeah.
And what are you working on there in Vilnius? Because these last Russian troops or Soviet troops don't leave till the end of August, 93.
Yeah. So they left basically as I was arriving. They were leaving, and we had a temporary person there. As soon as it opened up, there was somebody that just went there just to kind of start working with who are going to be the new people to talk to and things like that. And he'd been there just like a couple of months. He wasn't going to be permanent or anything. So he introduced me to the chief of their new Lithuanian intelligence service. And his name was Jurgis when I met him. And this guy was like leaving that day. So he was taking me around very quickly, to meet these people. So we sit down with Jurgis. And so I'm like, hi, and we're talking in Russian and, all the rest of the stuff. And he says, so tell me about yourself. And I said, well, I've just done a tour in Moscow. I just did one in Warsaw. I've been doing Russia. I've been in the CIA for X number of years and this and that. And he goes, good. And in Russian, he's like, good. Then you'll be my teacher because guess what? until today, until like yesterday or the day before or whatever it was, it was only like a week ago. He goes, I was a school teacher. He goes, I don't know what I'm doing. And that happened all around the Soviet new countries. And so we had a very big training program that then headquarters set up, not me personally. They set up that they would get people, and all of us had a native Russian speaker with us. And I had a native Russian speaker as one other guy. He was a contractor, but he was a really good guy. He was treated like a diplomat as far as his status and everything. And then I had a communicator. And that was my station. I had two people working for me, and we worked in a place that the Russians kept turning off the heat. And so we would often sit with our Russian hats on and coats inside the office, inside the embassy. And country team, you've heard about country team meetings. That's what the ambassador holds like once a week, usually at every embassy. And so we'd have country team meetings usually twice a week because there was so much stuff going on there. And so we'd have a country team meeting. The ambassador would say, well, the commies are trying to make something, make a comeback in Parliament. And we'd be going, ooh, kind of thing, all 13 of us. And then he'd turn to the next guy and he'd say, do you have anything to say, Mr. Political officer? No, I have nothing else to say today, sir. But I went to a restaurant last night and I didn't get food poisoning. And we're like, where is it? And there was no street signs because they'd toned down all these Soviet signs. So it's like you go down by the burnt out this, and then you go right where the rubble is, and then left, and then you go down these stairs under this rubble building, and that's what you do. And we'd be like, oh, this is great. So it was a really fun time to be there. The other thing they were really worried about at the time was loose nukes. And so, and that word got out to the world, is that we were really worried about Russians or others, a lot of the loose nukes could have been down in the different new countries in the South, like to believe Georgia or Azerbaijan or something like that. And so that was the big thing. And they were worried about the Iranians and, loose nukes and all the rest of this stuff with terrorist groups by this time. And so we would be looking for that all the time. And so we got trained, actually, all of us COSs from these countries, all of us young little 13s, went out to Vienna, got trained on what we needed to look for, what was a real nuke, what isn't, and stuff like that. For instance, if they bring in some radioactive material and you test and you have a Geiger counter, everybody here is going to take a Geiger counter home. So you keep that under your desk. You show your one other guy how to use it, and take it down. And if it reads at this level, that is going to be something that's very radioactive but has nothing to do with weapons. If it's at this level, it's very low radiation, but that is going to be a nuke, something that could be used. And so sure enough, it was just me, like I said, me and this other guy. Walk-in comes in, we get a call. Brian goes downstairs to talk to him first. And the first thing he does is, if he's around, I make him go first, is he has the Geiger counter and he goes in and it's not reading. And then the guy will lift up the thing and it goes off and he goes, get out of here. And we had a protocol with the nuke guys in Lithuania where they would come and get this off and put it in a safe place, that sort of thing. So that's how it would work. And so I did a lot of these too. It's nothing. Then one day I go down and I'm like, I was really busy. I was kind of grumpy that I had to go down because the communicator was off doing something else. I was like, I'll go down. And so I go in and I, do the whole gig, and I look in and I see this lead container, just like the picture showed that I saw, with a lid and some Soviet, some Russian Cyrillic markings on it that were the correct Cyrillic. And I was like, huh. And I go in and I talk to this guy and I say, so who are you? And he goes, well, I'm a former KGB officer. And I have fallen in with a group of, basically a bunch of, a clan of other former KGB officers. And we saw that you're paying for people to get loose nukes off. And I have highly enriched uranium in this thing. And I said, well, where did you get it? And he said, I got it in Ukraine. And he said, and people were selling it. That's how they were doing it. I'm like, ooh, that's bad kind of thing. And so he comes up through Belarus and he's like, he has this and he has it with me. And so I take off the lid and sure enough, it looks right. It has the foam around it. It's got another lead thing inside and then another lead thing inside that thing. And I'm like, huh. And so I pull up the littlest one and I take it out and I lift it and it reads at the right radiation level. And I close it down and I tell this guy, you sit here. I am taking all of this upstairs. I'm going to keep it. And are you okay with that? And he's like, I'm fine with that. And he says, and I will bring the others in as I get them. And I said, fine, but you just stay here now. I'm going to come back and talk to you. So I bring in, the guy and I go upstairs and I call Mr. Nuke guy. And Nuke guy in Vienna is like, immediately says, I'm on a plane. He was. So he comes and I said, so he goes, how long is it going to take you to get here? He goes, well, I probably won't get there till tomorrow. And I said, what should I do with this until tomorrow? And he goes, oh, do you get any radiation around it when it's all closed up? No, just bring it up to your office and hang out there. I'm like, okay. And so I did. And there it is, me and my guy, Brian, with this highly enriched uranium with us. Anyway, new guy comes and in the office, he opens it up. He goes, this looks good. And then he briefly opens the thing. He looks at it, everything else. He closes it and he says, 100%, this is it. He goes, I knew it when I got the readings, but I can see it because I can feel it. He had gloves to do it because you don't want to get it on you, of course. And he's like, this is it. And if he's got like 5, 8 more of these, whatever he said, we need them all off. And I said, okay, that's great. And I said, so what should I do with this? Do I give this back to him? He goes, no, just keep it here in your office. And I said, he goes, there's no problem with it. You can see it's not radiation. You can just kind of leave it in the corner of your office or maybe put it in your safe. And then that way, nobody would see it when they come in to see you or something because it was a 1-room office. That was all it was. And so I was like, okay. And then as he's walking out, he says, oh, one important piece though. And I'm like, what? He says, don't get it wet. And I'm like, what? He says, don't get it wet. And I said, look up. This is the most leaky building ever. And, because it's this old Soviet building and it hasn't been renovated, blah, blah, blah. And there's like drips everywhere. He goes, right. He goes, that's why you don't want to get it wet. And he goes, and so you don't want it under a drip. So just leave it in your safe and don't get it wet. And I said, okay, but what would happen if it got wet? I mean, how bad could it be? And he goes, oh, how do I explain this to somebody who's not a nuclear scientist? He goes, okay, remember Hiroshima? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, picture Hiroshima, but without the explosion, but the same amount of dead people, all the way up into the Finland and everything else. That's what would happen. And I'm like, got it. Don't get it wet. So put it in my safe.
Wow.
I didn't get it wet.
No, I can imagine. I think it's difficult for people to remember that during that period, it's almost like the Wild West in some of these countries. And
I understand they're beautiful now. Yeah.
Yeah. But, law and order has sort of fallen apart to some degree. There's loads of people out of a job.
Yeah. And willing to do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get people walking in offering you Soviet technology and things like that as well?
In Vilnius, no. It was every now and then there would be somebody, but I don't remember a really good what we call a spy that would provide what we call FI, foreign intelligence. What's going on in the military, or what's going on here, or what's going on there. The guy who brought in the canisters had a little bit of information because I, of course, asked him those questions too. So tell me a little bit more about your military unit and all the rest of that stuff. But we got a couple of walk-ins that were one that was absolutely a dangle from the Russians, and kicked him out and sent him over to the Lithuanian officials. But I don't remember anybody that was good there. That was Vilnius. It was in Warsaw, the previous assignment, where I had a really, really good luck, and also in Prague. Yeah.
I hate to bring this up, but didn't Mitrokhin walk into a CIA station initially and got turned away and ended up in MI6 in one of the Baltics?
It was one of the Baltics, and that was after I left. He did not walk in when I was there. I want to say, do you have the year he walked in? It was either before or after I left. I forget what, but I think it was after.
92. So it's a year before.
It was the
You
year
were in
before I was in
Vilnius.
Vilnius.
Yeah.
So it was in between my Moscow and Vilnius one. Yeah, so it was at that time. And so, yeah, he did walk in at that time, and I think it was not handled right, or we didn't have somebody there. We trained the State Department people how to handle them too, but however it was, it might have been our officer that was there that was just there kind of holding the flag because he spoke Russian, but he didn't really know what he was doing. Or it might have been somebody from the embassy who hadn't been briefed like we do with the country team. Anybody new that comes in, we brief them on how to handle a walk-in. We now brief them before they go and after they come. And we do that with our own people too, because some of our own people have screwed it up as well. So long and short of it is, yeah, he did. Yeah.
Well,
It's a
easily
shame.
done, because you're getting so many of these people coming in, and from all the descriptions I've heard, Mitrokhin didn't look like he was a KGB officer.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that I mean, your view of what a KGB officer, I mean, most of the ones that I met with were not like sleek and like what you would see in a James Bond movie or anything like that. They were just like normal people wearing normal clothes. Yeah.
So did you have any other sort of unusual incidents like that in either Warsaw or Vilnius that you can recall? I'm not sure we're going to be able to beat the enriched uranium story.
Yeah, the uranium one, no. In Warsaw, I already mentioned the guy that gave us all the NATO guys. And, no, that's about what I remember from those 2 tours.
And so you're there till 96. That's a 3-year tour. You must have seen the
Mhm.
country change quite significantly over that period.
Yeah, you could see it change. Like, the first few restaurants that we would go to that were the go-to restaurants weren't the go-to ones by the end of the tour. And so that was so cool, and, really, really enjoyed that. So, yeah, so I came back, and I, at that point, was running the Russia House back room. And then I went to, let's see, Moscow, Warsaw, Vilnius. Yeah, ran the back room, the area that handles the assets that are the most precious, that we really want very few people to know about. Their information goes out to very few people in the US government, et cetera, and things like that. So I did that right after I left and before I went to Prague. Yeah.
Were there walk-ins that sort of were prepared to stay in post and then therefore remain sources of information for the US in the years to come?
Yeah, there always were ones that would come in and say, "I am sick and tired of not having any money and everybody blah, blah, or whatever, and I would like you, to help me. I've got this kind of information. In exchange, I want that." And so, yes, there were, and to this day, there still are people that do that. So that's and they're all American heroes for helping us out, but also a little bit, because it's very dangerous for them to do. But they have a dream and all of that. And so that's where we get other people that come in, including one, I think I mentioned this already, one that I handled that gave us Nicholson and Hanssen as spies. So, yeah.
Can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, he was an interesting individual, but he, yeah, he We actually ran him for a while, and we actually resettled him. He'd been run for a while before I ever knew him, and he'd been providing very good information. And so he needed to come and meet us outside of Russia or the Soviet Union, and so he came into Warsaw to talk to us. And this one guy, and he says, "I have given you already some good information, so you know I'm real, but I haven't given you the best information." And he goes, "You guys know that there's a mole in your mist." And we already knew that from others. And I said, "Yep." And this was at the time when our agency was focusing on Brian Kelly as being the mole. And you can look up his name if you haven't heard it yet. And so, and I remember when some of us heard it was Brian Kelly, that guy? No, he's not a putz. It's only putzes. All the spies are people you hate. It's like, of course he did it, not Brian, right? But he was being focused on, and it was erroneous. But we had bits of information that made it look like it was going to be it was a FBI guy. And then we got this guy who told us it is an FBI guy. And here's his name. And here's where he lives. And here's, all of this stuff. In fact, he lived just a few blocks from where I live here in Vienna, Virginia. So,
Wow.
I didn't know him, of course. He was a different age, and his kids didn't go to school with my kids or anything. But yeah, it was really, really interesting. But the FBI was like, it can't be an FBI guy, it can't be an FBI guy, blah, 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 blah. And then we gave him this final piece of information, and he literally threw his pen down and said, "Fuck, I know this guy." I can't stand him. I knew something was wrong with him. Kind of thing.
And so that FBI CIA rivalry is true, yeah.
It was. It's not now. What we decided to do, and because we didn't understand each other, we didn't understand that they are trained first as law enforcement, and so they're always thinking law enforcement, and so that's not how you run an agent. You don't question a guy and tell him you got to do. You work on him, kind of thing, and so it's just a little bit different. And so what we did is we started doing where FBI agents were coming to our ops courses, and we had people going to their courses so that we could understand them better. And then we started pushing down FBI and CIA interaction, and actually State Department and DIA and NSA interaction down to even lower level people, so you can get to know what these other people do and how they might be able to help you with whatever you want to work on. And it always depends on who's the director. We still had that exchange. And to the point that we also were having exchanges with people from CENTCOM coming up, and one of us going down there so we could understand warfighters better and all the rest of it. It's a really good program. It's small, but it's very, very mighty. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's pointless having these turf battles because you're all fighting the same fight and
That's true.
And should be working together, but
Yeah.
sadly it doesn't always happen. Susan, when you're working in these different countries, what was your relationship like with the MI6 guys?
Yeah, so after I became a manager, I started interacting with them I think I met the MI6 guy that was in Vilnius. I just can't remember his name. Starting there, I started getting together with fellow English-speaking people. We weren't called the Five Eyes then, but later on we were called the Five Eyes. And that would be Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, and had a great relationship with them. We share so much together. We do joint operations. We have really good intelligence sharing because we want to make sure that our closest allies have the same information we have, and they want to be sure we have their information because we need to be talking together about then how to solve different issues as they come up. And so that's what we do. And so they were the only ones that were allowed to come into stations. Like if a French guy said, "Hey, can I come meet in your office, Susan?" It'd be like, "No." And I'm not against French. It's just that this relationship with Five Eyes allows that in most places, I should say, and for them, for most places as well. And so we literally share everything because we know that we are looking for the exact same ways into the brains of all of our enemies. And what I mean by brains is into their NSC, into their intel services, into their governments, etc. And when we share it, we get better information, and we also can get to a place where we're not competing against each other. And so for different sources and things like that, instead of competing, we'll just go and say, "Hey, I think you, the Brit, you have the better chance because we think this guy might be a little bit too anti-American, but we really want to get him," and, stuff like that. So we work that kind of thing out. It is a huge, what I want to say, over the years, this is one of the biggest changes that has happened that has also worked. We keep doing that, and it's extremely important. Like in Australia, lots of work with them on China, and New Zealand the same, and again all over the world. So it's super important.
When you look back at your 40-year career at the CIA, what was your best experience there? And the second question is, what was your worst experience?
Best experience ever was going to Moscow for my first tour. I mean, it set me up for my whole the fact that I was successful at all, honestly. I had the great managers, I had this, I had that, I got this really exquisite training from the beginning. So I can't, and I would say second best was probably Malaysia. Because we were going after, with the Malaysians, some bin Laden hideouts, after 9/11. And that was interesting because that also got me back into a different area where I was able to do that. But I also, Israel's the only place I went to twice. So I loved that place too. So all of them were great. All of them made me who I was. And I would go back to any of those places in a heartbeat. I wouldn't go to Russia now because I've heard that they've got me on me and a bunch of others on an arrest warrant. But I would basically go anywhere. I just love travel, and I love being overseas, and I love the work I did. I retired about a year ago. And I retired at the right time. I was, head of China Mission Center when I retired, and it was like the perfect time to retire. And I don't miss it, but when you ask me, would I will go back? Sure. Am I longing to go back because I'm not having any fun in retirement? No, I wouldn't long for it and go back, but, I don't regret it. That's the thing. I don't regret a single day I spent at CIA. It was just fabulous.
That's a great
Yeah,
answer. Great answer.
yeah.
What about the worst thing?
I had one boss that was a woman who hates women. And this was a headquarters job, and she was targeting me. And I was like, "This is weird. I don't even know this person, never met her before, etc." And was targeting me and, doing things that could have affected, future assignments and things like that. And so I went to a couple of people that I know and I said, "Do you know this person?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah. Do you have to work with her?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, God, you're doomed." I'm like, "What?" "Oh, she hates women." Like if you ask her, if the polygraph person said, "Name some friends in the agency that are women," she would have none. And so they said, "She's known for this. She's been sanctioned for it before. Now there's a new director up there." And so I went and got myself a lawyer, And I went actually to the director, to Burns, and I said, Director Burns, I know you know about this, and I explained what I said to you, and I said, I want you to know that I'm not taking this. And I am absolutely not taking this because there's no way I could be not a racist for 39 years and not for the 40th. You don't become a racist at your 40th year. And I said, so I have already gone to the EEO people because I know you have heard that this particular woman targets other women and you've never done anything about it. And I'm going to EEO and I'm filing a complaint against her and against you, sir. And I mean this with all due respect because I really liked him. He was a very gentle man, but he was not a good director because these types of things I found out after this had happened all the years that he was there, that I was there. So, with other people, So long story short is it all worked out fine. And so I finished my job as chief of China Mission Center and went off into a short training thing because I was planning on getting into training in my retirement as a clearance holding contractor. And so that's what I did is I went off and I started doing training in the cleared contracting word post-retirement for the last year and a half until recently. Yeah.
I must admit, I thought the thing you were going to say was the best thing that happened to you in your CIA career was meeting your husband.
Oh, him too. Yeah. I was thinking about work, but in all seriousness, Andy and I have talked about it. Hey, the State Department put us through these hundreds of $1,000 programs so that we could meet and be together. It was great.
The episode extras, such as videos, photos, and other content, are available via a link in the episode information. The podcast wouldn't exist without the generous efforts of our financial supporters, and I'd like to thank one and all of them for keeping the podcast on the road. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and look forward to seeing you next week.